So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our MC, who is Luis Parada. You saw a picture of Luis in Phil's opening comments, and he'll take over now. I also told the CCR alums that they should feel free to go back to the old building and tear off a piece of their benches. Luis actually took me seriously. I saw him earlier today. He was walking across the street with a chainsaw. As you saw in the picture, and as I saw him walking across the street, he had a big beard, but then the chainsaw took effect, and here he is as he is today, Luis Parada.
Thank you, Tyler, my friend, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and of course a privilege. And I think that we should begin by congratulating Tyler on his leadership, together with all of his colleagues, for not just the symposium, but for the transition from the Cancer Center to the Koch Institute. Tyler, thank you very much for holding the flame. We know that cancer research at MIT will continue to hold that highest standard, that jewel that we heard about from Phil Sharp and from Richard Hines, and I think that that's really terrific. Now, it is, for me, really amazing to come back to MIT after so many years. Those were such important years in my life. I actually started at MIT in 1979 at the Cancer Center when I joined Bob Weinberg's laboratory and left in 1985. So that was a period of importance that I will never forget scientifically, but also in terms of the friendships and seeing so many of you that I have not seen in these 25 to 30 intervening years is quite a remarkable and wonderful and warm event for me. Now, in coming back here, there obviously are some amazing things. You walk down that corridor from Building 10, which I did today twice, it hasn't changed. It's exactly the same way. Vannevar Bush still lives there. I mean, the things that go on in this place is just amazing to me how things haven't changed. Yet, you walk back to where the honorable and venerable Cancer Center is, and things have changed dramatically. Because in 1979, when I joined, Kendall Square was basically a dump. It was a wasteland of warehouses, and there was the Cancer Center, there was the fire station, and there was the F&T lounge. And all of you who were here in 1979 remember the F&T. The amazing thing is that so many of us are still here because basically our arteries should be completely clogged, because when you look up greasy spoon in the dictionary, there's a picture of the F&T lounge. I don't know when it went or where it went, but it has warm times. I saw all of my colleagues there. This was the only place we had. There was no legal seafood for us. There was nothing quite like the way that it happened afterwards. And so it is true, Tyler did see me going into the Cancer Center today. Some graduate students were very gracious to me. They saw I was now an old fogey as I walked in, and they pointed out that there were signs that said, "Welcome, MIT Center for Cancer Research alum," which was very nice. And I went up, and I'll be honest, I went up because I wanted to see Margarita Siafaca, because she was one of my favorites, and she wasn't there. But I dearly wanted to say hello to her. I'll come and give you a hug a little bit later. In walking into the Cancer Center, I realized that, things hadn't changed, but I had, because it looked tiny. I went to my old bench, and I was like, there were 3 people working on this bench. I cannot believe how small everything looked. And it really, to paraphrase a famous saying, I think one can look at that building and say, never have so few done so much for so many in cancer research in such a tiny, minuscule space. And so congratulations on your brand new building. You're going to get all of the space that you all deserve to do what you want. Also for me, beginning in the Cancer Center was extremely, moving and it was very important, but I thought that in my first month in Bob Weinberg's laboratory, it might be my last month in research, because it is true what they said, that at the 5th floor of the Cancer Center, the lights were never out. And so I found it amazing, the rhythm of work there. And two postdocs took me under their wing, Fred Alt and Steve Goff. And they were fantastic postdocs to have as mentors, because they taught me how to do plasmid preps. They taught me how to make diazo paper to do RNA blots. They got me into this chin-up competition. We had a chin-up bar. And in the wee hours of the morning one night in my first month, they said, they were talking about rock climbing, and they were bragging about this rock climbing move where, you know, you're going up a crevasse and you have to stand basically horizontally on your hands and feet and make your way up the crevasse. And Steve bragged that he'd done it many times, and you know, they said to me, can you do it? And I was like, well, you know, if you guys can do it, I can do it, right? And the next thing I know is I'm flat on my belly on the corridor of the Cancer Center, walking my way up the wall of this corridor right by our little Wednesday conference room at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I actually did it. I don't know exactly how I did it. I'll tell you what, when I got to the top, there was only one way to get down, and that was to let go. I thought, well, okay, fair enough, I did that. I know that this was on a Tuesday night. And the reason that I know this is because on Wednesdays at noon, we had floor meeting. And floor meeting was in this tiny little room that no longer exists, I discovered today, where everybody from the Hausman, Sharp, Weinberg, and Baltimore labs crammed into, and we had this intensive meeting where 1 or 2 graduate students talked about their data. And we got in there and sat down, and Phil Sharp, who I barely knew at the time, said, before we begin floor meeting, I want to bring up something. And, you know, everybody was very curious, and he said, I walked in this morning, and I saw footprints on the wall. That is just the most disrespectful thing I have ever seen in my life. He was furious, and he said, anybody who would do such a thing does not respect what we do here and does not respect, and he went on and ranted and raved. I have one pair of shoes. You know, my soles are distinctive. I'm cringing. I'm thinking life is over as I knew it. Steve Goff and Fred Alt are just giggling, and I'm like, I'm sitting there going, guys, please, just don't say anything. Needless to say, I avoided Phil Sharp for the next 4 months, under the assumption that if he did know who it was, that maybe he would forget about it. And of course, the reality is that Phil has always been a gracious mentor to me, and we never talked about it, but Phil, my apologies, it was me. But it was really Fred and Steve's fault. They put me up to it. Similarly, you showed a picture of me. You wouldn't recognize me. I used to have lots of hair everywhere. Now I don't so much. Mopping, this mopping picture, Varda Rotter immediately remembered the event, as I do too. I was mopping up radioactivity, tremendous amounts of it. But it was Cliff Tabin's radioactivity. It was not my radioactivity. So I just want to set the record straight that my very good friend Cliff, who I hoped would be here, that this was all his doing. So again, you know, I get blamed for a lot of things. You'll find this out about me that I had absolutely, really nothing to do about. Okay, in 1983, and this is my last little comment before I introduce Nancy Hopkins, it was a bittersweet moment because the Whitehead Institute was created through the force and energy of David Baltimore, and some of us had to pick up our stuff and move across the street. And we were very sad to do it, and I was very sad when I walked into the 5th floor today to see that all of our height bars that I had carefully painted when everybody joined the laboratory are no longer in the Cancer Center. In fact, when we moved to the Whitehead Institute, it was a bittersweet moment too. The bitter one was that the person who was the plant manager at the Whitehead Institute, Tom Peoples, was the character that Steven Spielberg used to create Darth Vader. And so, you know, when I immediately, when we moved in, started measuring people on the wall, he came over there and wanted to destroy me, and I had, you know, to bring out my trusty, you know, sword and light sword and fight him off. So that was the bitter part. The sweet part, and there are rumors about how this came to be, and I won't get into rumors because I don't believe in spreading rumors, but was that David Baltimore bought this beautiful convertible Saab. It was just awesome. It was a beautiful car. Funnily enough, over the course of the next year, all these other Saabs started coming into the course. It was sort of like, I think the faculty decided one way of being successful is to have this really nice Saab. But the reality is that, you know, that meant that he had to let go of his very orange VW Rabbit. And I purchased that very orange VW Rabbit from David, and for a good price. It was a fair deal, and I loved that car, and I was proud to drive it for the remaining 2.5 years of my stint at MIT. And then when I graduated and moved to Paris to do my postdoc, and that's another story that I have no time to tell you about tonight, I had to sell my VW Rabbit. And so I put signs up around MIT, you know, VW Rabbit is a little old, a little used, whatever. Nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. Time to leave was coming close. And then I had this idea. So I took the subway up to Harvard Square and went to the biolabs and put up exactly the same signs with the same picture of the VW Rabbit, but I wrote underneath it, original owner, David Baltimore. In 24 hours, I was in a bidding war. It was the most amazing thing you've ever seen. I had calls from every graduate student and postdoc in the biolabs, and they all wanted this car. So David, I made a great deal. I feel these 25 years later that I should have shared the proceeds with you, because I think I might have sold the car for more than I bought it from you for. But the reality is that, you know, I was a poor graduate student and I needed the money to go to Paris. But I have to say that, you know, time passes and we remember all of these old memories. Phil didn't let us reminisce this morning, appropriately so. This is just a bit of a reminiscence, and for me it's a great honor, but a more important honor is that next I get to introduce Nancy Hopkins.